Alright, so here we are 2 days later. I got some parts in. The other day I didn't catch it on video, but I put my PCV valve cover back on. So after I put the PCV valve back on, I started to clean out the flywheel. I just started to take a pick and, pull out all loose debris out of there, and I accidentally discovered that one of the magnets right here had become dislodged. And I'm actually happy that I found this, because I believe that's the reason why my alternator kind of blew up like it did. So I'm guessing what happened is the magnet became dislodged, and it kind of probably caught this other magnet on a 45-degree angle, and it caught this alternator in a bad way and just boom, probably just blew the thing up like that. So what I purchased is some JB Weld 2-part epoxy, which is specifically designed for steel high temperature applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-epoxy that magnet back onto this flywheel, and I may add some more JB Weld epoxy on these other magnets in here just for a little assurance in the future. I do have a new alternator. I bought a Briggs & Stratton OEM alternator, which this thing is pretty hefty. I'm very confident in that putting 3 bolts on this will be fine, so I'm not too concerned about the 4th stud. It's like $70 for that part, but it is made in the USA, so I'm not complaining too much. There's an aftermarket one made in China, $5 or $10 cheaper, but support the USA, right? So for those of you that have never used epoxy before, you can relate using epoxy. It's very similar to welding in that, maybe 85% of the work is prep work, and only, 15% is actually doing the work that needs to be done. So I read the directions, and it's important with this stuff that you remove all loose dirt and oil and grease, which I've done. Just took a wire brush and cleaned everything off the best that I could. And then on top of that, I ended up using starting fluid to help remove any excess grease or oil. So then with this epoxy, what you do, it's pretty simple. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio, so you mix 1 part of the black stuff to 1 part of the red stuff. In the cap, they have a little puncturing knob. You just poke it in there like so. Not quite like Bondo, because Bondo, the hardening agent, you don't put the same ratio in. So for like a golf ball sized glob of Bondo, you only put a couple drops of the hardening agent in there. So we're just going to mix this together until it's pretty similar color. I'm just using a little piece of kindling. I didn't want to use a screwdriver or anything metallic because obviously, the magnets are magnets. So anything that's ferrous is obviously going to want to pull towards the magnet. So a little piece of kindling, wood, it's a good option. Good idea to wear gloves too. The manufacturer says that this stuff is not good to get on your hands. So, all right, so that's pretty consistent. I'm pretty happy with that. Now I've never epoxied on magnets before, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very light amount, just put it on the back of the magnet, kind of like glue. Maybe a little bit on the casting too. So I know the tolerances with this stuff is pretty tight, so I don't really want to, or the tolerance between the magnets and the alternator is pretty tight, so I don't want to, have it sticking out super far. Also going to put some on the bottom here. Put that right down. Really like to take a straight edge if I can find something to make sure that it's in line with the other magnets. I think that's pretty much the same height as the other magnets, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now, I'm going to take more of this epoxy and I'm going to come in from the sides now and just try and cement this thing in here. So here we are, day 5. All the epoxy dried on this flywheel. And everything looks pretty good. All these magnets are definitely not coming out of here now, so I'm not going to have... Hopefully, I won't have to worry about the alternator blowing up again. But, yeah, I don't know if you guys caught it, but as I was putting epoxy on these magnets, I made sure to wipe off any epoxy that got on this face of the magnet. So I think we are about ready to put this flywheel back on the mower. But, of course, first we need to put the alternator on, so let's do that. But before we put the alternator on, I'm going to try replacing the seal. I do have a new one. So what I've seen online is guys will drill into this. I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea. I guess I'm in it now. I don't know, I think I saw something like they drilled in there and then tried to put a screw or something in there and then yank it out that way. So that's what I saw online. We'll give it a try. Hope for the... I'm gonna figure out a way to pry up on it. That screw's definitely in there though. How can we leverage this out? Huh. That actually works really well. Okay, I have the new seal. I had a little bit of grease on my garbage can, so I'm just using that to kind of lube it up a little bit and have it slide in there a bit easier. But I have a socket. It fits right over the seal, so I'm going to hold that right there, and then we're going to tap this down evenly. I don't think I want to go too deep. Seems pretty even. I think I'm going to leave that right there. Yeah, looks good to me. Okay, now we can put the alternator back on. Okay, so this is going to go on here like so. That is a perfect fit, which is good. Yeah, and that feels pretty darn solid. I'm not really concerned about that missing stud right there, so I think we are in really good shape here. Just got to make sure I plug this back into the appropriate connector. Okay, I believe it is time to throw that flywheel back on here. Can't wait to give that a spin, and hopefully nothing is making contact with anything else. Alright, I think we're ready to throw this flywheel on here. Now, something important that you want to watch for when you're removing the flywheel or putting it back on, just keep an eye out for this keyway right here. I think you guys can see that pretty well right now. And what a keyway is, it's basically a square piece of steel, and what it does is it locks the output shaft to whatever that shaft is driving. So if you didn't have a keyway and you just were to put this on the output shaft of the engine, most likely this would really not spin, or it would take quite some time for this to build up to the same RPM as the output shaft. So again, this just takes the output shaft and takes the flywheel, and it just pretty much makes them as one component. So when you're putting this back on, just make sure that that keyway lines up. That went right on. Alright, so let me spin this a little bit and try and feel if anything's making contact, and I'm not feeling anything hit anything. Everything feels smooth. Can feel the compression of the engine a bit, which is good. So I think we are in pretty good shape. Alright, so now that we got the flywheel on, next thing I can do is put this fan on here now. If you notice, small engines normally don't have any antifreeze, meaning that they're not liquid cooled. This engine is an air cooled engine, so therefore It's important that it has a fan to help keep the engine cool. Just make sure I'm not missing any other parts, which I don't believe I am. Now I can start tightening down this bolt. Just trying to remember how this goes. There's a big protective cover that kind of goes over everything. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, now as for how tight you're supposed to get this bolt, according to the online forums, I think they said you're supposed to torque this down to like 150 foot-pounds. Now, because of all the work we've been doing in the crankshaft, and not to mention it's been probably 2 years since I changed out the oil, now is definitely an ideal time to do an oil change. There she is. There she is. Also going to put a new filter in here. Got the pan underneath there, in case we get a little bit that drips out, which, yeah, there's a little bit. Definitely way overdue for an oil change. Kind of embarrassed. I'm normally a bit more on top of maintenance, but you know, I think we keep our cars priority and sometimes we neglect the lawnmower. But she's getting her turn tonight. Definitely getting her turn. So I'm sure almost everybody knows, but when you put a new oil filter on there, there's a little rubber O-ring. When you put the new filter on, you're always supposed to lubricate that O-ring so you don't tear it, which, you know, that O-ring's so thick, I don't think you'd really tear it, but it's just good practice to get into. Put a little fresh oil on that O-ring, or old oil too, just something. And then with these, you don't have to go crazy. I mean, you just want them definitely hand tight. You definitely don't want to take a wrench and start cranking on these. I mean, if you feel like it needs to go a little bit more, it's fine to get a strap wrench, not an aggressive removal tool like this, but get a strap wrench or something and just put like a little half turn, that's fine. But yeah, definitely a tool like this is only for removal, because this will dig in and tear apart the filter. Alright, let me fill her up and throw the cover back on the engine, and then we should be about ready for a test fire.